Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2017 National Crime Victims Service Awards ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of colors by the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard and the performance of the National Anthem by the U.S. Marine Corps Brass Quintet.
Halt! Halt! Quiet! Halt!
Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt!
Halt! Halt! Halt! Read and halt! Halt! Right shoulder. Halt! Halt! Halt, turn. Halt!
Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt! Halt!
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, David S. Ferriero, Archivist of the United States.
Good afternoon and welcome to my house. It's nice to have you here. It's an honor for us to serve as your host for this afternoon's award ceremony. And I'm glad to recognize Jesse Benuccio, the Acting Associate Attorney General, Alan Hansen, Acting Assistant Attorney General, Office of Justice Programs, and Marilyn Roberts, Acting Director, Office of Victims of Crime. And the guest speaker today, Kevin Mulcahy, Executive Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. I'd also like to acknowledge the awardees, family members of victims of crime, and allied professionals from across the United States. Welcome. This week, President Donald Trump said in his National Crime Victims' Rights Week presidential proclamation that crime and violence rob people of their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We must focus on the plight of crime victims and search for effective solutions. The National Archives is the home of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, known collectively as the Charters of Freedom. These sacred documents were created to protect the rights of all Americans, and I can't think of a better setting for today's ceremony than in the place where those rights are preserved and celebrated upstairs in our rotunda. When we opened our doors in 1935, our mission was to collect, protect, and encourage the use of the records of the United States government, and most importantly, to make the records available so that the American people can hold its government accountable and learn from our past. We're the final destination of the most important records of the United States. John Russell Pope designed this building as a temple to American history. He believed only a monumental building in his beloved neoclassical style could appropriately showcase the most treasured documents of our democracy. He made the National Archives building taller than neighboring structures, surrounded it with a moat, and set it at an angle to emphasize the importance of the building to the American people. He wanted everyone to know that records matter. Our records start with the Oath of Allegiance signed by George Washington and his troops at Valley Forge, and go all the way up to the tweets that are being created in the White House as I am speaking. So now you know what keeps me up at night. It's a collection of about 13 billion pieces of paper, 43 million photographs, miles and miles of film and video, and about 5 billion electronic records so far, the fastest growing part of our records. These are not static numbers. Every day we take in or accession more records, and we estimate textual records grow by about 500 million records each year. Our records include the Victims of Crime Act, signed by Ronald Reagan in 1984. This act was created to help victims of crime, and it established the Crime Victims Fund. At the National Archives, history comes to life. Each record, large or small, is a representation of a greater story, many of which are still being told today in daily life. Thank you for coming today and choosing our historic building for your event.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 2017 National Crime Victims' Rights Week theme video, Strength, Resilience, Justice.
Strength is the power to stand on your 2 feet after something happened to you and say, this happened to me, it didn't break me. I'm still here, and I can figure out the next steps.
Resilience is the building of these positive pieces in a life so that they hold together to work with an individual in their recovery.
For every victim, the definition of justice may very well be different. Victim services can work with victims to help them define what justice means for themselves, and then supporting them as they pursue that justice.
Survivors can be isolated in their communities. They have to be able to assess and evaluate what is going to be the safest option for them.
We want to be able to evolve with our participants, so we really keep their voices present in our work.
I am a survivor. For me, for example, part of my resiliency is being in the field. I feel that it's really important to be part of the change, to have my story heard.
High five! All of us want to live in safe and strong and healthy communities. Not everyone gets to go through life without having experienced some degree of harm. How do we try and repair that harm that was done to that individual and to the community as a whole?
When I think about strength for service providers, as a deaf person, I think of going into space where there's no barriers.
I think it's really about all the issues that all the advocates are facing right now. So
And that means working in a multidisciplinary framework. It means approaching community and systems and survivors with a way to really understand what needs are going to be met. So oftentimes when I'm working with a survivor, I want to know, what does help look like to you? Not, here's my menu, and these are all the things I can offer you. Which one do you want to pick?
Multidisciplinary collaboration strengthens service providers because we're constantly in communication with each other. It's very important for us to find partners out in the community, for example, job programs or drug treatment programs.
It's going to take that partnership. It's going to take some bridges. When the players play together in the agencies and that they really bond and develop the programs, you can actually see how they're measuring change within both the clients and the professional staff.
As a funder, we think it's really critical that victim service providers are partnering, and we can actually incentivize them to do that. We strongly believe in creating continuums of care, and so for our providers, we actually require that they enter into agreements with each other.
It's important to have the continuum of services for our participants. A lot of times these young men, based on the systems, systemic racism, a lot of these young men don't get the opportunity to heal from whatever hurt that they've seen. We need to be consistent in how we work with them.
And if you don't have that cultural competency or the compassion, then you're not going to be able to deliver and provide resources that are intended to be provided to our survivors to get them past the state of victimization.
Part of what culturally relevant services is also about is being able to push back on community norms that need to change, and to identify those norms so victims and survivors feel stronger.
It's always good to look at the strength within the group, find the positive pieces there, and build from within.
Resiliency is that core that allows us to heal, that allows us to survive. And when we think about whether it's vicarious traumatization or secondary trauma and what a very real threat that is for service providers, it's being able to go back to that core.
You don't only need services for people who are harmed, you also need an investment in well-being for everybody. And I think that's a very important component of justice.
We can make our communities better. We can make our communities stronger.
In order for that to be successful, in order for us to have thriving and healthy communities, we have to first recognize and build on the strengths that we have. We have to engage in the efforts that feed those resilient responses, both in individuals and in organizations, and ultimately those will contribute to the achievement of justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marilyn M. Roberts, Acting Director of the Office for Victims of Crime.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 37th observance of the National Crime Victim Service Awards ceremony. Thank you, Mr. Ferriero, and your staff for hosting us in this historic venue for the third year. My thanks also to the U.S. Armed Forces Color Guard for today's presentation of colors, and the U.S. Marine Corps Brass Quintet for opening today's ceremony with the national anthem, and for the great music beforehand. We are honored today to have with us the Acting Associate Attorney General Jesse Panuccio and Acting Assistant Attorney General Alan Hansen and Assistant U.S. Attorney Kevin Mulcahy. My thanks to all of my colleagues in the Justice Department, partner agencies, and the many distinguished guests who are with us today. And also welcome to members of Congress and congressional staff who've joined us today. I'm honored to be serving as the Acting Director of the Office for Victims of Crime and continuing to help support the crime victim assistance field through our many projects and programs and initiatives. I extend thanks to our partners in the victim assistance field, many of whom are in the audience with us today, for all that you do each and every day to help crime victims. It's also my privilege to recognize our award recipients. Your amazing accomplishments and deeply moving stories exemplify this year's theme: strength, resilience, justice. Your efforts illustrate the importance of a future in victim services where all victims are strengthened by the response they receive. Organizations are resilient in response to challenges. Communities and survivors are able to seek collective justice and healing. Today, I'm pleased to announce the release of a new OVC electronic publication that addresses vicarious trauma. Dealing with vicarious trauma is a challenge for victim service providers and allied professionals. OVC's Vicarious Trauma Toolkit offers information about the impacts of various vicarious trauma and includes tools that providers can use to assess their organizations so they can become vicarious trauma informed and more resilient. You can find out more about the toolkit after the ceremony by visiting the OVC exhibit at the back of the hall and accessing it on our website, ovc.gov. Organizing this ceremony requires the dedicated work of many individuals. I want to acknowledge Maria Berry as the lead OVC staff person who planned and organized this event with the assistance of Leslie Wilson and many other OVC staff and contractors. I also thank the staff of Kaufman & Associates for providing logistical support for this event. And of course, I want to recognize Robin Smith and her staff with Video Action for producing the theme video and the inspiring award tribute videos that you will see today. I also want to acknowledge the continued partnership between OVC and the Postal Inspection Service to raise awareness about victims' rights and services every April. For the 12th year, National Crime Victims' Rights Week themed posters and takeaway cards with toll-free numbers for victim assistance are being displayed in more than 11,000 post offices throughout the country that serve over 7 million customers each week. My thanks to the Postal Inspection Service for your contributions to communities throughout the nation. And lastly, I want to thank the OVC staff for their hard work, for their passion about their work and what they do, and for being just great people. It's a privilege to work with them. It's now my honor to introduce Mr. Alan Hansen, Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, who became the Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs on January 30th, 2017. Mr. Hansen brings more than 17 years of congressional policy, management, appropriations, and political experience, having worked in a variety of capacities in the private sector and the legislative branch. More than that, since he became the Acting Assistant Attorney General, he's shown a steadfast commitment to supporting OVC and the victim assistance field we serve. It's my pleasure to introduce him today. Please welcome Acting Assistant Attorney General Alan Hansen.
Well, thank you all for your, thank you, Marilyn, for your kind introduction and your kind greeting. It's an honor to be here and a privilege to help recognize these outstanding individuals and teams for their exceptional service to crime victims. I'd like to extend a special welcome to Acting Associate Attorney General Jesse Panuccio, who I'm very glad to have with us. I'd also note that he is my boss, so we treat him very well. Let me express to David Ferriero and the staff of the National Archives our appreciation for hosting today's ceremony. It's fitting that here in the building that houses our nation's founding charter, we can honor those who fight every day for the cause of justice. I also want to thank our very own Office for Victims of Crime, led by Marilyn Roberts. OVC and its partners have worked hard to make this event worthy of our award recipients. Thanks as well to our guest speaker, Mr. Mulcahy, who we will all look forward to hearing from shortly. I also bring greetings from Attorney General Sessions, who I'm sure would want me to convey to all our awardees and to everyone in this auditorium his deep appreciation and admiration for your service to our nation's crime victims. A long scheduled commitment kept him from joining us in person today, but in spirit he stands beside you all and beside all who suffer as victims of crime, as well as those who assist them in their time of need. Having worked closely with Attorney General Sessions as a member of his Senate staff, I know how very much he cares about the issues facing crime victims. In his many years on Capitol Hill, he was a steadfast champion of victims' rights, going so far as to support a victims' constitutional amendment. I can assure you that he carries that commitment into his role as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. For our Attorney General, a former federal prosecutor, the safety of America's citizens is paramount, and he believes that no one deserves the promise of protection more than crime victims. His task force on crime reduction and public safety is already at work exploring solutions to the crime problems in many of our towns and cities, the brunt of which is borne by victims and survivors. Meanwhile, our Office of Victims of Crime is doing its part to give victims and those who serve them the support they need. Just last month, OVC awarded an $8.5 million grant award to the Florida Office of the Attorney General to help provide services for victims and survivors of last year's mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. The grant came out of OVC's Anti-Terrorism and Emergency Assistance Program, which has been a critical source of aid and recovery for victims of mass violence, and it's a resource I am very glad we can offer to communities in the aftermath of tragedy. But for all the work we're doing here in Washington, we know that it's not federal dollars that make the real difference. It's the service providers and their local allies who do the heavy lifting. It's the health professional who starts a crisis center in her own home. It's the lawyer and the police officer who fight for the rights of sexual assault victims. It's the organization that serves elder abuse victims and the program that helps young male victims of violence. It's the team of prosecutors and investigators who bring long-awaited justice to victims' families, and it's the agency that supports victim assistance programs across an entire state. It's the young survivor of sexual assault who dedicates herself to protecting the rights of other survivors, and it's the families who have experienced tragedy and loss and who find a way to help others. America is a better place because of each of you, individuals who, whether on your own or as part of a team, work to bind up wounds and give voice to those who have been silenced. You are the ones who change lives, and for that, this Department of Justice and our nation will always be grateful. We honor your service and congratulate you on a job well done. Thank you for being here today. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. As the Acting Associate Attorney General, Jesse Panuccio is the third-ranking official at the Department of Justice. He brings to the position a wealth of litigation experience, public service, and legal expertise, as well as a strong commitment to public safety and victims' rights. I'm very glad he could join us today. It's indeed an honor to help us award our award recipients. Please give a warm welcome to Acting Associate Attorney General Jesse Panuccio.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Thank you, Marilyn. It's a pleasure to join you today and an honor to be with all of the awardees here today. You're hearing a lot of us have the title of acting. You may be wondering what that means. What it means, in short, is if you like what we're doing, it means we're serving in that capacity, and if you don't, we're just pretending. That's how I view those titles. It really is an honor to be with so many accomplished individuals and to be celebrating the important work that you do. I want to congratulate all of the outstanding award recipients here today. Among a field of extraordinary professionals, the Department of Justice pays tribute to you for your selflessness, for your exceptional service, and for your uncommon devotion to justice. You have set a very high bar indeed, and the department is proud to honor you here today. In reflecting on the work that you do over the last week as I was getting ready to come to this, I was reminded of the first time I ever encountered a crime victim in my life. And I think I must have been about 11 or 12 years old, and I came downstairs, grew up in a suburb in New Jersey, and I came downstairs and my mother had come home from the supermarket and she was crying, and I asked her what happened, what was wrong, and she said that while she was at the supermarket, she turned away from her cart for a minute. She had left her purse in there to get something off the shelf, and someone had stolen her wallet out of the purse. And I remember fairly vividly, even to this day, sort of the feeling of helplessness that she had and the feeling I had in being able to do anything to rectify that and to help her and to fix that injustice. And I do have that feeling. It's indelible even today. And so I remember that moment, and then I thought about the fact that this was a petty theft. And so when I think about the victims that you help, victims of physical and sexual assault, victims of domestic abuse, victims of elder abuse, victims of trafficking crimes, the families of murder victims, I realize just how difficult and how important your work is. In hearing about your achievements, I was struck not just by your obvious and deep commitment to helping others, but by the incredibly diverse ways you have found to improve, often significantly, the lives of crime victims. You do this difficult work in rape crisis centers, on college campuses, in courtrooms, in hospitals, in training facilities and community centers, on international waterways, and for some of you, even out of your own homes. You do this work by investigating crimes overseas and by helping victims who have come to the police precinct. Some of you, incredibly and selflessly, even draw from your own tragedy to bring light into the lives of others. You have inspired us and you're making a difference, and the Department of Justice is incredibly grateful for your service. We also recognize that what you do every day is not easy work. You see people in the worst moments of their lives, and yet you are able to summon often and sometimes eventually the best in them. That's a remarkable quality, and it's a uniquely generous quality, one that each of you is using to advance good in your communities. One of the most amazing things about the honorees here today is probably that many of them would say, if they had their preference, they'd rather be out of business. They'd rather see a society in which there were fewer and fewer crime victims to help. Unfortunately, right now the opposite is occurring. Tragically, our country, for the first time in years, is seeing an increase in violent crime. According to the FBI, from 2014 to 2015, there was nearly a 4% increase in violent crime and a 10% increase in the murder rate. In some cities, the increases are far more dramatic and far more devastating than even the national rates. We see the violence and the pain that is taking hold, and we understand more than ever how much we need all of you to keep doing the important work that you're doing. And the department stands ready to help. Under the direction of our Attorney General, we are working hard to implement strategies that will reduce crime and improve the safety of our communities, to prevent the very victimization and trauma that you all see on a daily basis. This is a responsibility we take seriously, and it is a top priority for Attorney General Sessions. I am pleased that through the Office of Victims of Crime, we are able to assist victims across the country through programs like the ones that many of you operate. Our work is sustained by everyday heroes, by all of you, who give so much of yourselves without demanding the recognition that you are properly getting here today. Today's ceremony is a single opportunity, and perhaps not enough of an opportunity, to acknowledge in our own small way your contributions to crime victims, to public safety, and to the progress of our nation. We at the Department of Justice are honored and proud to honor you, and we stand ready to work with you as partners. Thank you very much, and congratulations to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen, who had to leave, and thank you, Mr. Panuccio, for being here. We very much appreciate it. Today, we are privileged to have Assistant U.S. Attorney Kevin Mulcahy as our guest speaker. In addition to his work in the Detroit, Michigan U.S. Attorney's Office, Mr. Mulcahy serves as the Executive Assistant United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Michigan. Most of his caseload as an attorney for almost 15 years has been focused on child exploitation crimes, including production of child pornography cases, traveler cases, and other significant crimes against children prosecutions. Mr. Mulcahy has dedicated his career to combating these heinous crimes against children and protecting those who are most vulnerable. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Mulcahy.
Thanks so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to walk around a little bit. Podiums make me nervous because I'm about 2 inches away from being comically short, so the closer I get to them, the less of me. I mean, truthfully, though, if I stood behind there, you'd see like 60, or like, I don't know, 20% of me. Thank you very much for having me. I have, as Marilyn said, my name is Kevin. I've been a prosecutor for 15 years, all on the federal level, but I've always been out in the field. I've been assistant U.S. attorney in San Diego and also in Detroit. And I've never been to Main Justice. And you should know we talk about you a lot. But I do feel comfortable being here with so many federal workers because, as Marilyn also said, I've been an assistant U.S. attorney for almost 15 years. In fact, a week from tomorrow is my 15th year anniversary. So as all of you know, you can share in my joy that I will now move to 8 hours of annual leave every paycheck. That's right. So I'm going to pivot away from that because after insulting Washington and bragging about how much time I'm going to take off in front of the Associate Attorney General, let's turn to something different, shall we? So I am excited to be here and really humbled to get an opportunity to talk to you at Crime Victims' Rights Week. And this ceremony is such a perfect way to end this week. And I want to congratulate, first of all of those receiving awards today. You guys certainly are inspiration to all of us who do this work. And I have to tell you that I get energized when I hear these stories of people who've dedicated their talents, their lives to helping victims of crime. As the Associate Attorney General said, these are folks in their darkest moments. This is their low point. And there you come in. And you could do anything with your talents. And you choose to do that. And I am just so honored to be with you. But before I talk about you, let me earn some real estate up here a little bit. What gives me the right to talk to all of you? Why is it that I'm up here? I'm here because, like you, I've dedicated my career to the darkest moments of those kids' lives and those victims' lives. I'm also up here because that new path of victimization, a path that's so scary and lonely for our victims, is a path I've walked myself. 9-year-old Kevin was a pretty good little soccer player. I love sports. I always have. I love all sports. And when you're built sort of like a fire hydrant, you have some limitations as to what you can do. And so soccer was the sport that I chose, and I played for as long as I can remember. When I was 9 years old, I met a new soccer coach. His name was Randy. He was unlike any coach I'd ever had in my life. He didn't know any children on the team. He wasn't the dad or the uncle or the neighbor. He also didn't work for the YMCA, which was the organization that ran our league. He was just a 26-year-old guy who liked hanging around 9-year-old boys. What could go wrong? And the other piece about Randy that was so different is he seemed to really care about his players. He spent a lot of time with us and talked with us a lot, and he especially liked me, and I liked him as well. We quickly graduated from him being my coach to him being my friend, and from him being my friend to him being my best friend. And that was an important time in my life. There was a storm brewing in my house. My folks were on the pathway to divorce. I didn't know that at the time, but that was certainly where we were, and there was a lot of confusion in my house, and Randy served as a terrific ear for me to lean on. It was a wonderful relationship, and I have very little time to talk to you today, and every story of victimization is nuanced and detailed, but the reason that I tell you this is because, like so many of the victims you all serve, Randy wasn't the boogeyman to me. This wasn't stranger danger. This wasn't some kind of disruption of an otherwise normal life. Randy was my best friend, and I'm here to tell you, I loved the guy. He was my first real friend. And everything I thought he was, turns out he wasn't any of those things. You see, at that time, Randy was going to school on me and on my family. He was manipulating me and grooming me so that he could ultimately sexually assault me, which is what he did. And as a 9-year-old boy, I have to tell you, that was a heck of a thing. That kind of betrayal, of that scope. My first friend based our entire friendship on lies, and he used those lies to sexually assault. Going forward, I was able to extract myself from the relationship with Randy. My folks' divorce went through, and so we moved. I moved to a different part of my hometown, and life sort of went on. I also did my best to try to avoid Randy, and I did a pretty good job, but it wasn't perfect. I still would see him from time to time. You see, I quit soccer, the sport that I loved, and we moved, and I felt pretty good. But before we moved, and after I'd quit soccer, and I hadn't seen Randy for several months, I rode through my little bike through this parking lot. It was a parking lot I'd spent a lot of time with Randy in, and unfortunately for me, I was late this particular day, and I chose a shortcut that led through that parking lot. And as I pedaled through the parking lot, there was one car in that lot, and it was Randy's, a car all too familiar for me. And as my heart raced and I pedaled my little feet, and Randy called me over to the car, I picked my head up as I got closer to look at him, and I saw Randy in that car I used to sit, and there was another little boy sitting on his lap. And I pause here again because so many of our victims understand some things that I understood as a 9-year-old boy. You see, I didn't say anything. Part of Randy's manipulation and lies kept me silent for years, for about 3 years, including the time I saw this boy, and my reaction to seeing this boy still was not to say anything. And you can imagine 30 years later what my shame looks like. I stand here today and I don't know his name. So many of our victims understand that while they've been betrayed, their silence has led to other people being betrayed and victimized as well. My silence aided and abetted Randy's work. After that, a couple of years later, 2.5 to 3 years later, I finally did disclose in sort of a comical way that I don't have time to tell you now. That disclosure led to an investigation by a prince of a guy named Detective Barry Sherman of the Livonia Police Department. That investigation led to a prosecution by a coward of a man whose name I won't speak. Randy was ultimately convicted and got a tragically low sentence. And I was left to walk that new path alone. I didn't have you. It wasn't pretty. That walk was rough. We've done better since then. Legislatively, we've done better. As a law enforcement community, we've done better. As a society, we've done better for our victims. And a lot of the reason we've done better is because of the dedication of people like you. So let me turn to you now and say thank you and praise you for the work that you do. I have a really good friend at the office. She's a dynamite prosecutor. Her name is Maggie, and Maggie will often get phone calls from agents who have just kicked in a door at 6 in the morning, or it'll be the weekend and they're working some kind of case, or she'll be on vacation, it'll be late at night. They'll call her and they'll always start with, "I'm sorry to call you so late, early, often, whatever." And she always says, "Don't you apologize to me. This is the life that I chose. If I didn't want messy, if I didn't want your calls, if I didn't want to be waking up in the middle of the night, I'd have done something else." And I know that that's true about you. So thank you for choosing the life that you chose. I know it's not an easy life. The Associate Attorney General acknowledged as much. These cases are messy and chaotic. And when I say these cases, I literally mean whatever cases you're working on. All victimization of crime can be, at times, messy and chaotic. You have lots of cases, too many for one person to handle. I also know that it's often messy because the pushback you receive from judges, defense attorneys, sometimes people who are supposed to be on your side of that V in the middle. You get that pushback and I thought I was the hero here, but you're second guessed and Monday morning quarterbacked. I know it's hard, and I just want to say on behalf of victims everywhere, thank you for choosing the life that you chose. But I never, ever get in a room full of people who do this work and miss an opportunity to challenge you. Because I love you for choosing this life. I love that this is the life that you chose. But make no mistake, our victims did not choose this life. This life was chosen for them. I did not choose this path. Randy chose that path for me. And so understand that while your cases can be messy and chaotic, that often translates into a messy and chaotic life for our victims. And while you may have dozens and dozens and sometimes hundreds of cases and files and people to work at, they have one. And while sometimes you in your investigation or your work gets poked and prodded and second-guessed, and sometimes even by people, as I said earlier, that are supposed to be on your side, imagine what it means for those victims when they are poked and prodded and second-guessed by people that are tasked with loving them. So while I love you for doing the work that you do and choosing the life that you chose, as we walk out of this room today, let us not forget, this is not the life they chose. I believe in a couple of things very strongly, and one of them as I stand here is I know that I stand here today because of God's grace alone. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to talk to you today. That's why I've been given this life that is so much better than any life that I deserve. I also don't believe much in coincidences or happenstance. I don't believe you all are in the jobs that you have by some sort of cosmic accident. I think you're right where you belong, serving the people you're supposed to serve. And if I'm right about those things, then let me suggest to you that the work that you do allows you to be the face of God's grace. That you've been tasked the next time that phone rings and the victim that's on the other side of that is looking for God's grace in your face. My favorite author is C.S. Lewis, and he said, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. On behalf of all of the crime victims you serve, and on behalf of 9-year-old little Kevin, take these hardships that are commonplace in your life and use them to embrace your extraordinary destiny. Thank you.
Elder justice is a whole range of things that includes making sure that older people are empowered and safe. I was a prosecutor at the Manhattan DA's office, and one of the gaps in services that I saw was that if they needed shelter that was safe, older adults had nowhere to go. I really wanted to create an elder abuse shelter, and the Weinberg Foundation decided to give us a try.
Joy has put together an extraordinary team, a powerful group of people, both in the social work and legal field, and more recently bringing in a public health professional.
Everything that we do is about meeting people who have been harmed where they are. It's not just they need legal support, they also need therapeutic support. Therapeutic support includes art therapy, pet therapy, use of gardens to help them nurture and grow.
What's so rewarding about the Weinberg Center initiative is that we've created a model that A, does not require bricks and mortar, and B, makes use of existing resources.
We are so pleased that over these last 13 years, we've had 14 other nursing homes that have agreed to this model. Education and awareness is huge. We've trained Meals on Wheels practitioners, pharmacists, faith-based leaders. We forged a relationship with a union that supports the doorman. They see who comes in and out of buildings. I love being able to help people see light, to share their stories and give them hope. All of our work is geared to strengthen victim survivors.
I've been working in victim services for a little over 2 decades now. There weren't too many lawyers in the field at the time. I walked into the Pennsylvania Capitol and was in awe of the beauty of it, and I said, I wonder what I'm supposed to do now. Thankfully, I did figure out what you do over there and had a great relationship with the House and Senate Judiciary, which is where most of the bills would be passed. The nice thing about starting in a field that is blossoming was that I got invited to participate in the drafting of the Violence Against Women Act and had the opportunity really to influence national public policy in a way that I had not contemplated. There had never been a federal funding stream for rape crisis centers, so we worked on the Sexual Assault Services Program, which provides funding to rape crisis centers nationally. Knowing that there weren't services there to begin with, and because of me writing some words on a page that became real, then they were able to serve victims. So for me, that's the most humbling part of it. Violent offenders.
Yeah.
risk assessment. And
Diane's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. She's incredibly thoughtful. She's very determined, and everything she does, she's leading with what is in the best interest of the victim.
It's soul satisfying for me, knowing that I can make a difference and help people who do direct services, because that's one of the hardest jobs in the whole wide world. You learn to do what you think is impossible, and that's part of the trial and the pleasure of doing it.
Every 2 weeks, somebody goes missing on a cruise ship, like my daughter. It's not something that never happens, but the last thing the industry wants is for this information to be public. The steward had reported Marion missing daily from the time she got on that ship. They didn't report it, they knew it from the very beginning, and to get to that steward in a deposition cost us $75,000. At that point, we knew we had to do it on our own. You got to be willing to fight. You have to be willing to be persistent. We formed a little group called International Cruise Victims that nobody ever heard of. And what we've introduced has come from what the victims have suffered. The fact that victims have been raped, the fact that they've died because of poor medical care. We've taken victims who have never walked the halls of Congress. We came up with a simple 10-point program. We passed the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act. The international standards are being set up so that if somebody goes overboard, they can take immediate action. So we're making real progress, that crimes are being reported directly to the legal authorities that can do something with it. It's been a long journey. Now we're still working to make sure everything's enforced. When we started off at the beginning, we were just 4 families. That group has grown with hundreds of members in 35 countries in the world. As people have come together, it gives them a hope that they didn't have. And let me tell you, there's no more powerful group than a group of victims that becomes organized and has a purpose.
When I first got here, it was not against the law in Oklahoma to beat your wife. There was a definite need to have a place, a safe place for women and children to be able to respond appropriately to rape victims, rape and incest survivors. We didn't have that.
To come into our community 36 years ago and start this kind of an organization took a backbone like you just hardly ever see.
Everybody's got within them something that they want to give. And if you can touch on that and find ways for people to participate and to give in a way that is satisfying to them and brings them some joy, then you're doing a good job.
When she first came to the community, there was nowhere for women that had progressive thoughts. And so Linda has created a safe atmosphere, and she's given women a place to come together.
We started here in January of 1980. It was totally volunteer for the first 2 years. In '84 was when we were able to open our first shelter. And then along the way, we started adding other victim services. And who would have thought, we have an attorney. So when a woman comes in and she needs a protective order, she needs some assistance, you've got that to offer her and to help her. One of the great honors of my life is that I'm considered to be one of the founding mothers.
She has a gift for leadership and for community organization. And she has created here something that is so sustainable, so resilient.
We were responding to the need for women to have justice. I'm proud that my little piece has been a part of this bigger effort here and nationwide.
When a father loses his son, when a mother loses his son, the devastation is incredible, and it leaves a huge void. On April 18th, 2011, my son was murdered. He wanted to dedicate his life for reduction of crime, so we decided Basta Ya, which means it's enough, would be the proper name and function of a foundation to create in his honor. The Safe Zone was created as a concept, and it includes the commitment by the business people to help the police solve crime. We talked to the police, and the idea said we need something that technology helps bridge and bring united the community and the police. Sentigard is a mobile app that allows the citizen to send a crime report or a totally anonymous tip. Last year, through Sentigard, 6,200 tips had been sent to the police department, where their telephone tip line only handled half the amount of tips. In early 2012, I showed the U.S. Coast Guard what we had, and a lot of Coast Guard people said, yeah, that looks good. So we could use what we had learned in developing a law enforcement system, and we could turn it into a national software to help the boating community save lives, and also help the Coast Guard that had been so good with our son. But we as community have to go out and say, okay, let's help. How can I help? And out of that, the idea of a march came about. We want to challenge other agencies in the federal and state governments to figure out ways to work with the community in pursuit of victim rights and in the reduction of crime. So we went out there with an idea for a foundation to shake the tree at its roots, to hold the bull by the horns and do something with specific objectives of the reduction of crime and improving victim rights. And if you want to be someone in the community that helps the community where you're living in, volunteerism is key to it, and that's what we have done.
The 2017 National Crime Victims Service Award goes to Joy Solomon, Esquire, Weinberg Center for Elder Abuse Prevention, Hebrew Home at Riverdale. Accepting on behalf of Ms. Solomon is Daniel Reingold. The 2017 Ronald Wilson Reagan Public Policy Award goes to Diane Moyer, Esquire. The 2017 Ronald Wilson Reagan Public Policy Award goes to Kendall L. Carver. The Volunteer for Victims Award goes to Linda D. Axley.
love that song. Woo!
When I started in law enforcement in the early 80s, if you were to talk to officers about what they feel after they left a domestic violence call, they always said, we didn't get to do anything to help. You know, we wanted to strengthen the victim, we wanted to make them resilient, we wanted to make them whole.
Captain Holt has helped victims to trust our system, that our system here in Jackson does care.
We began to look at what did it take to get the victim out of the situation? What did it take to make that person safe? When we started the SANE program, there was a secondary component of that, and that was our SART team. Getting the draft together to get that out to everybody and get y'all's input on. We started dispatching the advocate at the same time the SANE nurse came in, the same time the investigator or officers were dispatched, and they all began to work together. And we began to break barriers.
I think other agencies and other individuals could and should take a page out of his playbook in breaking down silos.
We had to get the community involved. You see, these are crimes, whether it's domestic assault, sexual assault. Our society, the people, said, this is not acceptable. We formed the Mayor's Advisory Council on Domestic and Sexual Violence. It opened my eyes a lot more to how people saw the system.
We've got some wonderful partners here. Everything from counseling to medical care to safety for the individuals.
And we were able to incorporate that into what we have now, the development of our Family Justice Center, which we call the Safe Hope Center. We have really contributed to an attitude change amongst our officers. When they leave that call, they know that they have done more to help the victim than just make an arrest or just take a report. Having a supported victim in a criminal case is awesome.
I was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin when two men made a decision to sexually assault me. I really struggled to figure out how to access justice. I tried at the campus level, the criminal level, even the civil level, and at the end really felt alone, like I was navigating it by myself, and I never wanted a survivor to feel that way.
When I met Laura, I recognized that this was someone who had the potential to change the world.
I don't honestly always know exactly why I fought so hard or how I made it through a lot of what happened. So when people say that what I've done is courageous, maybe it was, but I saw no other option but to speak out.
She has gone from survivor to the nation's leading campus legal advocate in this country. So while her fellow law students were in class, she was actually making law.
I worked with advocates all across the country on the Campus Sexual Violence Elimination Act. I was challenged by fellow advocates to make sure if we were creating a right for victims to have attorneys, that there would actually be attorneys to follow through on that promise, and that's why I founded Serve Justice. We are the attorneys that go into hearings to support survivors. We've had well over 550 individuals reach out for assistance from all 50 states and actually 7 countries. We've had over 60% success rate in ensuring some type of consequence, whether it be a misdemeanor or felony conviction for a sex offense. I'm very passionate about making a difference in the lives of survivors. And for Serve Justice, I really wanted to become a household name, helping survivors every day until campus sexual violence is no longer such a prevalent issue.
During my freshman year of college, I was raped by another student. I think everyone who works at a university needs to be trained to respond appropriately in the aftermath of an assault. And I decided to start working with my university to encourage them to make changes to their policy and their procedures and to talk to them about what I had experienced and why that was such a problem and try to figure out how to make change together. They formed the Provost Committee on Sexual Assault Prevention and Response, and so I served on that committee up until I graduated. I was the risk manager of my sorority that people could go to if they had experienced a sexual assault or knew that a sister had. I served as president of my sorority for my last year in college. I used my role as president to run a lot of programming, talking about consent and what a healthy relationship looks like. I was featured in the documentary The Hunting Ground about sexual assault on college campuses, and the song was up for an Oscar nomination. So The Hunting Ground asked a bunch of survivors if we would be interested in joining Lady Gaga on stage during her performance. Walking out onto the stage and holding the hands of other survivors, I could really feel the power of the room and that this was going to be a huge moment for the sexual assault survivor movement. My hope is that people recognize that this is an issue, but that we can do something about it so that no one is alone in their experience.
Healing Hurt People is a unique trauma-informed, hospital-based violence intervention program that focuses on young people who have been victims of violence and who are seen in a hospital setting. The program is designed to engage a young person at the time of their injury when we know they're at greatest risk for re-injury, retaliation, but especially the symptoms of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Our patients are really traumatized. We see the symptoms do decrease when they interact with our community intervention specialists and partake in some of the program activities.
The program is designed to treat the mental health consequences of violence and to help young people plug into supports, medical, behavioral health, but also economic, housing, whatever the needs are.
So just before I saved it to the T-Drive, wanted to see if there was any feedback.
Since its inception and since the replication of the program across a number of other trauma centers in Philadelphia, more than 1,800 young people have been served by the program.
I was a participant of Healing Hurt People in 2011 after I was injured in the midst of community violence. I went to self-group and I started sharing what I've been learning. I've been sharing the hope that I have received. I went back to college to be a social worker, and I was inspired by the individuals who helped me.
The impact of Healing Hurt People has changed the conversation about violence among young people in health settings.
When we see the improvement of the lives of the young people that we work with, that's our reward.
All too often, victims are re-victimized by the failures of the criminal justice system. By making services uniform, we can help ensure that victims are provided their rights, understand their rights, and are provided the opportunity to exercise their rights. The agency support team was designed as a holistic approach to victims' rights. We have a state victims' rights administrator for training, we have a state victims' rights administrator for compliance, and a state victims' rights administrator for funding. All three positions conduct audits.
When agencies' policies and procedures align with statute, and then their daily practices match their policies and procedures, then victims can receive justice.
The Victims' Rights Advisory Committee was put in place several years ago to get people out of their silos, out of just thinking about law enforcement or just thinking about the courts, and seeing that it is a journey, that a victim has to go through all of these different phases in order to have justice done.
So this lawful rep is going to be afforded all of the rights that that victim would have exercised, received, gotten.
By educating our workforce and working with our stakeholders, we are having far-reaching effects on thousands of victims throughout the state as a result.
Our team has helped society be more just by including victims in the criminal justice system. We administer about a $3.2 million victims' rights fund that is distributed to about 60 criminal justice agencies statewide.
I'm very proud to be able to lead such an action-oriented, motivated, excited team. This team is very passionate about victims' rights and really wants to pursue and promote justice and healing for victims in the state of Arizona.
On September 16th of 2007, a Blackwater team entered Nicer Square. They were responding to a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device that went off a few miles from that venue.
They stopped traffic, and then, unprovoked, one of the Blackwater contractors fired a shot.
Gunfire erupted from the Blackwater team.
At least 14 Iraqis died. At least 18 were seriously injured by gunshot. The scene was absolute carnage. The defense in the case was that the contractors from Blackwater had been attacked by insurgents, and it was very important for the jury to meet these victims to know this is no terrorist, this is an ordinary person whose life was tragically changed by the actions of those contractors.
It took 7 years from the time the incident occurred till the trial.
The trial was set for June 3rd, 2014.
We brought over 47 foreign nationals from Iraq.
Many, if not all of these folks had never left Iraq. So there was a huge effort by the FBI to start getting all the documents together to travel.
It was important for the team to be culturally sensitive to those victims because of the different values and traditions and customs.
We requested from the State Department experts in the Iraqi culture and also in the Arabic language to help us train our staff and anyone that was going to be touching this case. We found a hotel that was willing to let us take the entire floor. The manager there put prayer rugs and prayer beads and marked each room for Mecca.
And then, we had to make sure their security was ensured. So we actually ended up having agents sit over 800 shifts at the hotel, night and day, making sure that they were safe and that their needs were met.
It was important for us to be part of this legal process and to achieve justice for those people.
This was a historic case for the Department of Justice.
This team made the impossible possible.
Luis Romero, Bastia, from Guaynabo, Puerto Rico. The 2017 Allied Professional Award goes to Captain Michael Holt. The 2017 Special Courage Award goes to Laura L. Dunn, Esquire. The 2017 Tomorrow's Leaders Award goes to Maya Weinstein. The 2017 Professional Innovation in Victims Services Award goes to Healing Hurt People, Center for Nonviolence and Social Justice, Drexel University. Accepting on behalf of Healing Hurt People is Dr. Theodore Corbin. The 2017 Crime Victims' Rights Award goes to Arizona Attorney General, Office of Victim Services, Agency Support Team. The 2017 Federal Service Award goes to the Blackwater Victim Services Team. The 2017 Ronald Wilson Reagan Public Policy Award goes to Teresa P. Scalzo. Accepting on behalf of Ms. Scalzo is Ms. Marie Scalzo and Carl Scalzo.
Teresa was most passionate about justice for victims of sexual violence. I mean, that was her absolute passion.
Then I want to tell all of you, I thank you so much for everything that you guys do. I've done a lot of work with the Guard through my career, and every time I do, I'm amazed at how far above and beyond you guys go with oftentimes very little resources. I'm grateful to you, thankful to you.
She was at the top of the field in terms of her understanding of the crimes and the advocacy necessary to successfully prosecute those crimes.
She was definitely a visionary in the realm of her field of work.
I have seen big changes in how we train prosecutors and how we prosecute, and how we support victims and how we protect victim rights.
Teresa was the chief architect of many of the trainings that were implemented around domestic violence and sexual violence that are still being used now. She really did change the conversation from what did a victim do in the situation to what did a perpetrator do.
We created the very first national level non-stranger sexual assault trial advocacy class.
It speaks to the kind of respect that she had in the field and the fact that she wasn't on the prosecution side or the defense side. She had expertise to offer, and people trusted and respected her knowledge and her analysis, and they allowed her to create resources for some of the most important members of the criminal justice system.
In the 10 years that I have been working for the military, I have seen great strides made in protecting victim rights.
Hey, Bobby. Thank you.
Most of Teresa's greatest accomplishments at the Navy and in the Department of Defense were in working on policy that allowed victims to have specialized attorneys that represented their rights.
We spend weeks with our investigators and prosecutors training them about the impact of trauma and how to investigate and how to interview. We consult on cases, we assist with prosecutions.
She was an amazing trial attorney, an amazing presenter.
Teresa worked diligently while she was very ill. She had some home chemo treatments. She was on the phone with her boss, giving him the rundown of, okay, this is what I'm working on, and this is what we need to do next. And she just continued to do her work as usual.
One of the most important legacies that she's leaving behind is this drive for realizing that the work isn't done. What more do we need to do so we can get to this place where justice is being achieved for everyone?
She didn't let anything stop her. She wanted to continue to do everything that was important to her in her life, and she did that every day, to the end, every day.
The 2017 Ronald Wilson Reagan Public Policy Award goes to Teresa P. Scalzo, accepting on behalf of Ms. Scalzo. The 2017 Ronald Wilson Reagan Public Policy Award goes to Teresa P. Scalzo. Accepting on behalf of Ms. Scalzo is Ms. Marie Scalzo and Carl Scalzo.
Thank you all. Let's give our award recipients, all of them, one more round of applause. Okay, looking to next year. If you know of an individual, an organization, a team, or a program that demonstrates outstanding service in supporting victims and victim services, please consider nominating them for the 2018 National Crime Victim Service Award. Watch the OVC website for an announcement of the open nomination period. Recipients will receive their awards at the observance, which will be during the week of Crime Victims' Rights Week next year, April 8th through 14th. Please join us for a reception in the foyer to honor our 2017 award recipients, and be sure to visit the OVC resources table. This concludes the ceremony. Thank you so much for coming. Oh my God. Yeah.